Colombian teachers are continuing a 48-hour national strike. Crowds gathered in Hanau, Germany, to honor the victims of 2 mass shootings that killed 11 people on Wednesday. The Syrian army has repelled terrorist attacks in the eastern countryside of Idlib province. South Sudan's warring leaders have agreed to form a long-delayed unity government. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. And we begin in Colombia, where teachers started a 48-hour national strike on Thursday to condemn the violence they are subject to. The industrial action was called by the Colombian Federation of Education Workers. The Federation's president, Nelson Alarcón, called on all educators to join the action to protest against assassinations, attacks and threats to community leaders and Colombian teachers. Around 300,000 educators are also demanding guarantees for the teaching profession, such as the right to quality healthcare and adequate funding for public education. And our correspondent in Colombia, Hernan Tobar, brings us more details in the following report.
Thank
you and good afternoon. Today was the first day of a strike and mobilization by over 35,000 Colombian teachers who are protesting the murders, death threats, as well as the harassment and displacement affecting Colombian teachers. We accompanied the demonstration in Bogota, but it was a nationwide rally. Teachers demand guarantees to fulfill their duties as well as respect for their lives. Just to mention a few numbers that illustrate this situation, so far this year, 2 teachers have been murdered while another 300 have received death threats. This is a very serious human rights violation, in particular in departments like Chocó, Cauca, Nariño, and Bolívar, seized by intense conflict. In Bolívar, according to the Colombian Teachers Federation, 24 teachers have been threatened with death in El Salado municipality, ground zero for the spiral of violence. In the year 2000, paramilitaries committed a massacre there. That explains the teachers' concern vis-à-vis these ongoing and ever-growing death threats in Colombia. Teachers will continue with the nationwide rallies tomorrow, and they will be joined by other social and human rights organizations.
And staying in Colombia, opposition leader David Racero presented an application for the opening of an investigation against President Ivan Duque following the accusations made by former Senator Ida Milano. Milano, who was arrested in Venezuela after escaping prison in Colombia, accused the Colombian political class of widespread corruption and vote buying, including in the election of President Duque. She also accused the president of wanting her dead. Racero presented the application to the Investigation and Accusation Committee of the House of Representatives. If the alleged crimes are proven, Racero will urge the committee to file the accusation before the Senate. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has declared a national energy emergency after the US government imposed unilateral sanctions on Russian oil company Rosneft for trading in Venezuelan crude. The president also announced the creation of a presidential commission to restructure and protect the state-owned oil company PDVSA.
Yesterday, a new set of criminal measures, criminal sanctions, was imposed against our oil company and the Russian company Rosneft. We have rejected this batch of measures. During the last 3 years, a state oil company, PDVSA, has resisted, standing alongside the mobilized working class. The company has been fighting against these criminal sanction measures that aim to destroy PDVSA, which is the main company of all Venezuelans.
And President Maduro also called on the Venezuelan people to take to the streets and protest against the latest US sanctions.
I ask all the people in Venezuela to mobilize for the defense of PDVSA, the defense of the workers of the oil industry of Venezuela. No more Trump, no more sanctions, no more blockades. Long live PDVSA.
Lawmakers from the Homeland Bloc and Venezuelan opposition parties announced the end of the nomination period for members of the new National Electoral Council. A preliminary committee was established to receive the nominations in December, but the election of the new leadership of the National Assembly, as well as the refusal by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó to accept his defeat, has held up the work of the committee. It was reported that 73 nominations from 68 social organisations across the country were received. On February 26, the names of the 10 members of the Nominations Council for the election of the new Electoral Council will be released. US Special Representative for Venezuela, Elliott Abrams, threatened this Wednesday to adopt measures against our international multimedia public service platform, Telesur. In a blatant violation of freedom of expression, the US official assured that the multi-state channel is under scrutiny, claiming it is not actually a news network. Abrams was appointed by Donald Trump to coordinate unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela alongside extreme sectors of the Venezuelan opposition. The attack on Telesur is part of this strategy. Just a few weeks ago, opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido claimed he would take over Telesur and even appointed far-right figures to lead the move. Brazil's Unified Oil Workers Federation ratified the temporary suspension of indefinite strike action in order to enter negotiations with the state-run Petrobras company. The decision was taken after the Superior Labour Court decided on Tuesday to suspend the mass layoff of around 1,000 workers, one of the measures that prompted the industrial action. The strike was triggered by the shutdown of a fertiliser plant and the company's refusal to comply with the collective bargaining agreement, as well as opposition to the Jair Bolsonaro government's privatisation of Petrobras. Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez highlighted the International Monetary Fund statement, which recognised that it wasn't economically or politically feasible for Argentina to pay back its debt. The IMF concluded on Wednesday that Argentina's debt burden is unsustainable. Fernandez's suggestion that his government first needs to focus on the social needs of Argentinians was also supported by the fund. The IMF also noted the Argentinian government's set of policies to address the rise in poverty, while also taking steps to stabilise the economy. And coming up, we have an exclusive interview with Cuban analyst Santiago Perez on the CARICOM meeting that concluded Wednesday in Barbados. Don't go away. Welcome back. The 31st intersessional meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community ended in Barbados on Wednesday with a resolution to improve regional integration and overcome disparities among the 15 member states. The two-day meeting saw leaders discuss their response to the coronavirus outbreak, the elimination of tariffs for transport and trade, as well as proposed fixed roaming rates for the region. They also discussed a potential Caribbean-African forum. CARICOM Chair and Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, expressed that evening out the inequalities between poorer and richer CARICOM members would promote true integration.
One of the problems that has bedeviled the community for some time has been the issue of the CARICOM Development Fund. And we recognize, as I've said over and over, that in any single market, a single economy, there are winners and there are losers. And it is to that extent that Chapter 7 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas speaks to the issue of there being need for a fund to be able to assist disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged sectors, disadvantaged regions. Member states have committed to capitalizing this fund. But this will never be enough to do what needs to be done, particularly with all of the challenges that the region faces at this point in time. Yesterday I outlined a number of them, and we keep seeing new challenges as we did with the COVID-19 virus. And to that extent, therefore, we feel strongly that we need to revisit the structure of the CARICOM Development Fund and to enable it to be able to raise additional funds, whether from individuals, companies, institutions, regional countries, and extra-regional countries.
And we spoke to Santiago Perez from Cuba's International Policy Research Center regarding the CARICOM meeting and its main outcomes.
I think that it's quite important that 15 countries of the CARICOM should put their voice in favor of the sovereignty of Venezuela and avoiding an intervention of the U.S. We have to be in the context. You have mentioned the whole sanctions that the U.S. has imposed again and again is increasing its sanctions against Venezuela and making very aggressive moves. I think that in that context, the idea that 15 Caribbean countries have spoken loud against the intervention of the U.S., and they don't mention that, but everybody knows that, is of paramount importance for peace, for security, and for stability in the region. That doesn't mean that all of them share the same view on Venezuela, but that principal position and that coherent position is very positive. The same with Cuba.
And CARICOM leaders agreed on Wednesday to send a fact-finding mission to Haiti. The mission is a bid to find a solution to the ongoing social and political unrest in Haiti, a CARICOM member country, where opposition parties are demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moise. The mission will be led by CARICOM General Secretary Ambassador Irwin Larroque and will include representatives from the Bahamas, Jamaica and Barbados. Regional leaders are due to meet in 3 weeks for the CARICOM Mexico summit, by which time they expect to have the results of the fact-finding mission. Moise was among several Caribbean leaders who did not attend the two-day intersessional meeting that ended in Barbados on Wednesday. Democrat presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders has reiterated his commitment to fighting inequality in the United States. In a message on Twitter, Sanders highlighted the inequalities in his country and added that he will not apologize for standing up against the situation. According to a recent poll, Sanders leads voting intention within his party with 32% support and is considered by some analysts as the candidate with the best chance of beating Republican Party would-be candidate Donald Trump. The commanding officer of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in the province of British Columbia has opened the door to police leaving Wet'suwet'en territory in a gesture of good faith. Railway blockades and protests have been ongoing in the area against the construction of a natural gas pipeline over Wet'suwet'en territory. Deputy Commissioner Jennifer Strachan said she sent a letter to community chiefs on Wednesday explaining that a small detachment near Houston, BC would be decreased if the chiefs and their supporters continue to grant access to coastal GasLink workers. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs say the project has no authority without their consent. French workers took to the streets in protest against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform on Thursday. This was the 10th day of national strikes and protests against the overhaul of the French pension system. The French Parliament is expected to debate and vote on the pension system bill in the first week of March. The proposed law would merge the 42 existing private and public sector pension schemes into a single, universal points-based system. French unions argue that the reform is a setback to workers' rights.
Yes, it is interesting because the government support for a universal points-based pension system is declining. We heard the letter representative of the majority in the National Assembly supporting the government's project. Unfortunately, I am hearing the same general statement about the fact that this project will bring improvement. It will be better tomorrow, but no one is able to tell us in concrete terms how it will be better tomorrow.
Et vous avez pu constater qu'on a un gouvernement et une majorité qui...
You have seen that we have a government and a majority that are funding more and more to supply their counter-reform. We have had some juicy anecdotes. The value of the point that evolves on an index that does not exist. So there you have it. The determination is still the same, and therefore, despite this school holiday period, there are still people in the street.
Crowds gathered in Hanau, Germany, to remember and honour the victims of 2 mass shootings that killed 11 people on Wednesday night. A 43-year-old German man who belonged to a gun club and posted a manifesto calling for the complete extermination of various races and cultures attacked people, mostly Turkish Kurds, in a shisha bar and other sites in suburban Frankfurt. He was later found dead at his home along with his mother. Chancellor Angela Merkel condemned the attack and told reporters it appeared to have been motivated by the poison of racism.
Everything will be done to investigate the circumstances of these terrible murders to the very last detail. However, much currently indicates that the perpetrator acted out of far-right racist motives, fueled by hate against people with different backgrounds, different religions, or different appearance. Racism is a poison. Hatred is a poison, and this poison exists in our society, and it is to blame for far too many crimes.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back. China reported the biggest drop in new cases of the coronavirus in nearly a month. Meanwhile, the total number of infections soared to 74,576. The death toll now stands at 2,018. The number of new confirmed cases has been gradually slowing. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his Southeast Asian counterparts on Thursday, calling for solidarity to counter the spread of the epidemic and urging China's neighbours to reopen borders that were closed in response to the outbreak. And as mentioned, members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations gathered in Vientiane, capital of Laos, on Thursday for a special meeting to discuss the COVID-19 outbreak. The foreign ministers' meeting, held alongside China, which is not a member of the bloc, saw the participation of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi.
China's forceful action has contained the spread of the virus inside China and also the spread of the virus to other parts of the world. China is not only protecting its own people, but also the rest of the world. This has gained precious time for the global response to the virus. Apart from its devastating impact to the health and well-being of our people, the coronavirus outbreak has been massively detrimental to trade, travel, and the global economy.
2 elderly passengers from the Diamond Princess cruise ship who were infected with COVID-19 have died, according to Japan's health ministry. The 2 were the first fatalities on the virus-stricken ship. The 621 cases confirmed on the Diamond Princess represent the highest number anywhere outside China. Hundreds of passengers, given the all clear, were expected to leave the ship on Thursday as part of a gradual process expected to last through Friday. Syrian Arab army units repelled attacks launched by terrorist groups in the eastern countryside of Idlib province on Thursday. The Syrian Arab news agency reported that the terrorists launched a mortar and rocket attack on the area. However, army units advanced towards the outskirts of Al-Narib town and managed to repel the attack while destroying terrorist ammunition and vehicles. Meanwhile, hundreds of Syrians are beginning to return home, with long queues of cars seen at the Nasib Jabba border crossing with Jordan. Displaced and refugee Syrian families are hoping that with the advance of the Syrian army and the liberation of almost the entire country, they can begin to rebuild their lives. Tourists are also starting to arrive, seeking to visit a country that has seen 7 years of conflict. The Nasib Jabba border crossing was reopened in October 2018 after Syrian forces defeated the extremist groups that controlled the area. Kuwait has announced a ban on imports from Saudi Arabia. Kuwait's Public Authority for Agriculture Affairs and Fish Resources announced on Wednesday the temporary ban on the import of all live birds and their eggs from Saudi Arabia due to the spread of bird flu. The World Organization for Animal Health said that Saudi Arabia reported the first outbreak of the H5N8 strain of bird flu on a poultry farm. Security forces clashed with protesters in the capital of Guinea on Wednesday, following the president's announcement to go ahead with a controversial referendum. Demonstrators took to the streets of Conakry to protest President Alpha Conde's proposal to amend the West African country's constitution next month. The referendum, if approved by voters, would clear the path for the president to seek another term. The move threatened to further inflame political tensions after a series of deadly demonstrations. Earlier this month, Conde said the referendum would be held simultaneously with legislative elections on March 1st, which opposition parties have already said they will boycott. South Sudan's warring leaders have agreed to form a long-delayed unity government. South Sudan President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar agreed on Thursday to form a unity government aimed at ending more than 6 years of war. Kiir confirmed they had agreed to a joint government for the third time since independence in 2011, an experiment which has ended in disaster twice before. The formation of a unity government was the cornerstone of a September 2018 peace deal. The conflict in South Sudan has left at least 380,000 dead and forced 4 million to flee their homes. Prime Minister of Lesotho, Tom Thabane, is set to resign in the face of imminent charges for the murder of his ex-wife. Thabane is expected to be charged on Friday for the gunning down of his ex-wife 2 days before his inauguration in 2017. The news came as Thabane announced he would step down on July 31st, following pressure from his party to quit over the scandal. Thabane's re-election in 2017 had brought hopes of stability to Lesotho, a country with a long history of political turmoil. And we've had news just in that Bolivia's electoral Supreme Court has barred Evo Morales and Diego Parry from standing in the elections. Likewise, the court banned Mario Cosio and Jasmine Barrientos from running due to non-compliance with the permanent residence requirement. On the other hand, Luis Arce, who is presidential candidate for the MAS party, is approved to run in the upcoming elections. And in other news, carnival events are underway throughout Brazil. This year's samba bands are expected to offer a social justice-themed twist to their performances, including issues such as anti-fascism, indigenous rights and other political themes in response to the far-right government of Jair Bolsonaro. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.